The night did not feel special at all. It was quiet, a little cold, and most people had already gone to sleep. Only a few scientists were still awake inside a hidden observatory in the mountains. They had been working late, monitoring usual space signals, hoping to find something new, maybe a star explosion, maybe a new planet. They were tired and half-bored, drinking cold coffee and talking softly so they wouldn't fall asleep. One of them stared at his screen, expecting nothing unusual. Then a small dot appeared. It looked like a random glitch at first, so he cleaned his glasses and blinked twice. The dot was still there. It wasn't static, it was moving. Not randomly slowly, steadily, cutting straight across the darkness. He called the others, thinking maybe his screen had a problem. But when they all checked their instruments, the same thing appeared on every device. A moving object heading toward Earth from deep space. It looked too fast to be a meteor, too controlled to be a space rock. Something intelligent was coming down at first. Nobody said anything. They just stared, frozen. Their hearts beat faster, but their minds refused to accept the possibility they had. Dreamed of for years, yet never prepared for. Emotionally, something, alive from somewhere else, was approaching. The observatory alerted other secret networks around the world. Within an hour, governments in multiple countries were silently notified. There were no press releases, no news reports. Leaders didn't want panic. They feared what people might do if they heard something like, "We are not alone." All around the world, early meetings were called. Some leaders insisted they needed to prepare weapons. Others said they must not do anything aggressive, or it might trigger a war humanity could never win. They argued quietly behind closed doors, trying to make choices that even they didn't fully understand. They didn't know if they should be brave, calm, afraid, or hopeful. And while they argued, the mysterious object kept moving toward Earth. Hours passed. People slept peacefully in their homes, unaware that their world was suddenly much bigger than they had believed. Cars moved through streets, babies cried, friends chatted online. Shopkeepers closed stores. Life continued as if nothing extraordinary was happening. But inside the hidden observatory and across secret rooms, the silence felt heavy. The object finally slowed down. It entered Earth's orbit and stopped. It didn't crash, didn't attack, didn't land. It just hovered above the planet like a quiet observer, even though no sound came from the object. Everyone who knew about it felt as if a voice was whispering inside their heads, "We are watching you." Governments tried sending signals to communicate, using radio waves, lights, and universal codes based on mathematics. The scientists waited anxiously for any reply. They hoped for something, maybe a greeting, maybe a message of peace, maybe even a warning. For a long time, there was nothing. Then, suddenly, a reply arrived. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't even emotional. It was extremely calm, almost too calm. The translated message from the unknown visitors said that they had been exploring galaxies and studying different life forms. Earth, they said, had been noted before, but never examined closely. Now they had decided to take a brief look. The scientists who read the message felt relieved. The governments, too. The visitors were not attacking. They were just curious. Many felt hope rising inside them. Maybe this was a chance to learn something new. Maybe humanity was about to be respected, welcomed into a bigger universe. But after hours of silent observation, the next message arrived. This one shocked everyone. The visitors said they had seen enough. They said humans were fragile, emotional, and chaotic. They stated that humans were too disorganized to pose any threat, too primitive to be taken seriously, and too unstable to participate in advanced interstellar societies. They said humans fought each other too easily, weakened themselves through conflict, and could not work together as one species. They concluded that Earth was not a threat, not a partner, and not important enough for further attention. The message ended with a short sentence that hurt more than any weapon could have. We will leave you to develop on your own. You are not of concern. It was not hatred. It was worse. It was dismissal. The leaders who read it felt a strange mix of embarrassment and relief. They were safe, yes. Humanity was not going to be attacked. But they had been judged and found unworthy. The scientists who had waited all their lives for this moment felt a deep sting. They didn't expect humans were ignored, not respected, not even feared. People outside remained unaware of what had happened. Children slept, teenagers scrolled through their phones, workers complained about their long shifts. Life stayed normal, while a few chosen individuals carried the weight of an alien judgment no one else knew existed. The visitors did not leave immediately. Their ship stayed in orbit for 2 more days, as if giving humanity a chance to prove something. Governments debated secretly if they should try sending more messages. Some wanted to apologize. Some wanted to show human achievements, metaphysics, art, language, technology. Others argued it was useless. The visitors had already made up their minds. Eventually, a few scientists used a different approach. Instead of showing weapons or scientific formulas, they tried sending a description of human history, the mistakes, yes, but also the progress, the creativity, the compassion. They sent stories of people helping each other, of kindness during disasters, of ordinary humans risking their lives to save strangers. They showed that humanity was messy, but that this messiness created growth. But the visitors never replied to those messages. Without a goodbye or warning, their ship slowly faded out of orbit, becoming a small dot again, shrinking until it vanished into the darkness. They disappeared as quietly as they had arrived. The observatories confirmed they were gone. Governments finally relaxed, the tension slowly dissolving. Some officials felt disappointed. Others were relieved it was over. The world continued as usual, with no one realizing how close Earth had come to something bigger than history. Only a handful of scientists, military officials, and leaders carried the truth inside their hearts. Humanity had been seen, judged, and dismissed like a child trying to play among adults. The scientists returned to their normal routines. But each felt a silent question echoing inside. Are we really as weak as they think? Or did they misunderstand us? The world was still asleep to this question. People were living ordinary lives. Humans laughed, argued, worked, loved, and struggled as they always did. They did not know someone had looked at them from afar and decided they were too small to matter. They did not feel less than anyone. Instead, they continued being human with all the flaws, emotions, passions, and unpredictable strength that aliens couldn't understand from a distance. The visitors had left, but their silent judgment remained floating above Earth, invisible yet powerful. It was a moment that passed without fireworks, without chaos, without public attention, yet history had quietly begun to change, because the universe had noticed humanity and walked away. And somewhere, humanity's real power was waiting to be discovered, not by aliens, but by humans themselves. After the alien ship vanished, life on Earth returned to normal on the surface. But beneath the calm, something extraordinary had begun. A small group of scientists and government officials quietly continued studying the data the aliens had left behind. Every signal, every reading, every small anomaly was analyzed over and over. They wanted to understand why the aliens had visited, and more importantly, why they had dismissed humanity as weak at first. Their findings were frustrating. The aliens' instruments were far beyond human technology. They captured energy patterns, gravitational waves, and quantum fluctuations that humans could barely even understand. Reports from satellites and probes showed that the aliens had monitored almost every corner of the planet, from the deepest oceans to the highest mountains, observing humans in cities, villages, deserts, and forests. They had watched wars, celebrations, disasters, and quiet everyday life. The scientists began to see a pattern. The aliens were not cruel. They were methodical. They had concluded that humans were chaotic, emotional, and prone to self-destruction. But the humans watching these analyses felt a mix of anger, curiosity, and determination. If the aliens thought humans were weak, maybe that judgment was based only on what could be seen from a distance. Maybe, the humans argued silently, the aliens had missed the parts that mattered most. They started to dig deeper. Using satellites, drones, and intelligence from around the world, they looked at humanity in ways the aliens might have missed. They studied communities coming together after floods, hurricanes, and earthquakes. They studied how people shared knowledge, medicine, and food in the middle of crises. They studied volunteers who risked their lives to rescue strangers. And slowly, the scientists realized something important. Humans were messy, imperfect, and often uncoordinated, but that messiness had a hidden strength. One researcher pointed to a map of global disasters and said, "Look at this. These are moments the aliens probably called weakness. Fires, storms, earthquakes. Humans suffer, but they survive. They adapt. They rebuild. Every time we fall, we find a way to rise again." Another researcher nodded. "Exactly. The aliens see our chaos and assume it's failure. But it's not. It's resilience. Humans don't follow a single plan or logic. They improvise. They create solutions under pressure. They work together in ways no algorithm could predict." The discussion grew intense. Every report of human weakness seemed to flip into evidence of hidden strength. When humans argued or fought, it looked like disorder, but when survival was at stake, they came together. Rival nations provided aid during famines. Scientists collaborated across borders. Ordinary people risked their lives for the safety of strangers. That combination of adaptability and compassion was something the aliens had never fully grasped. Meanwhile, outside the labs, the world continued unaware. Markets opened and closed, children went to school, cars filled the streets, and life flowed normally. Nobody noticed the careful, quiet work being done by a small number of humans trying to understand what had just happened above their heads. Humanity seemed ordinary, but inside the secret rooms, people were uncovering truths that could change everything that one evening. After weeks of research, a senior scientist gathered the team in a dimly lit lab. "We've been thinking about the aliens as observers, but maybe we should see this differently," the scientist said. "They didn't just judge us. They underestimated us. And that's dangerous. If we let them see only the chaos, they will continue to dismiss us. But if we show the real human story, our creativity, our courage, our ability to grow, they might understand something entirely different." The team began collecting stories, data, and examples. They documented ordinary humans achieving extraordinary things. Farmers finding ways to save crops during drought. Doctors inventing makeshift solutions when hospitals were overwhelmed. Teachers keeping children safe and educated in the middle of war. Engineers repairing broken infrastructure with minimal resources. Artists creating hope through music, painting, and literature. Each story was small, but together they formed a pattern that no distant observer could ignore. Weeks passed, and slowly the picture became clear. The aliens, the team realized, had only seen the obvious, the conflicts, the mistakes, the chaos. They had not seen the hidden networks of kindness and ingenuity that made human survival possible. They had dismissed humans because they had focused on surface weakness, not the deeper, quiet strength that flourished under pressure. One night, as the team worked late, A young researcher whispered, "Maybe the aliens aren't wrong. We are weak in many ways. But maybe our real power is not in strength or technology. Maybe it's in our ability to care, to adapt, to create under pressure. That's something no machine can predict." The others nodded quietly. The idea grew. Human weakness, when combined with imagination, empathy, and courage, could become unexpected strength. Unlike other species in the galaxy, humans had survived not by perfection, but by imperfection. They made mistakes, learned from them, and adapted faster than anyone could predict. As the team continued their studies, they began to notice another pattern. Humans were most powerful when they were under threat. When disasters struck, when societies faced disease or famine, when people were pushed to the limits of endurance, innovation and cooperation surged. New solutions emerged, often from the least expected sources. A farmer in a small village might develop a life-saving technique for water purification. A teenager in a crowded city might organize a rescue effort during a storm. Ordinary humans did extraordinary things when ordinary systems failed. The team realized this might be the part the aliens missed. From a distance, observing Earth only from orbit, the aliens could see the mistakes, the chaos, and the weak points, but they could not see the human spirit rising in response. They could not see courage, kindness, and determination woven into the small, unnoticed moments that made survival possible. The realization changed the way the scientists thought about humanity. They began to see Earth not as a fragile planet of weak beings, but as a hidden powerhouse. Humans were unpredictable. Humans were messy. Humans were emotional, but those traits, when combined with ingenuity and heart, created a force no distant observer could fully calculate. The researchers also started to feel a personal change. Watching the stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, they felt inspired. It was as if the aliens' dismissal had given them a challenge to prove that humans were more than what could be judged from above. They began to share their findings quietly with other trusted officials, building a network of understanding that humanity's true strength was not in weapons or politics, but in resilience, creativity, and compassion. Meanwhile, outside, life continued. People laughed, argued, fell in love, worked long hours, struggled with illness, and celebrated small victories. Humanity's hidden power unfolded in real time, unnoticed by the world, unnoticed by the aliens. And yet, in the hidden labs, researchers kept watching, documenting, learning. Every small act of courage, every quiet moment of brilliance, every story of ordinary humans doing extraordinary things added to a growing picture. Humans were far from weak. They were unpredictable, adaptable, and powerful in ways the aliens could not measure. One evening, after a long day of analyzing data, one scientist spoke softly to the team. "The aliens dismissed us because they didn't understand us. They only looked at the surface. But the real story is here in these small moments of life, courage, and resilience. We survive because we adapt. We rise because we care. That is our strength, and maybe someday the universe will notice it." The team sat quietly, feeling a mix of pride and determination. They understood now that human power was subtle. It was not about domination or war. It was about survival, creativity, and compassion. It was about ordinary people finding extraordinary ways to live, help each other, and keep going even when the world seemed against them. As the night deepened, the world slept unaware. Satellites circled silently above, still capable of detecting the faintest signals. Hidden observers continued their work, documenting, analyzing, and marveling at the human spirit. And somewhere, beyond the stars, the aliens continued their journey through space, having dismissed Earth as weak, unaware of the real story unfolding below. And yet, for the humans quietly watching, there was no fear, no doubt. Instead, there was hope, curiosity, and a growing understanding. Humanity's strength had always been hidden, subtle, and quiet. It was not in weapons or rules, but in courage, creativity, and compassion. And one day, perhaps, the universe would truly see it. Because even when the world seemed ordinary, humans were anything but weak. After weeks of reviewing the alien data and observing humanity from a closer perspective, the scientists began to notice something that surprised even them. The aliens, in their distant observation, had assumed humans were weak and incapable. They had seen wars, environmental destruction, poverty, and the endless arguments that seemed to define human societies. From orbit, it appeared as if humans were messy, disorganized, and fragile. But when the researchers examined life on Earth in detail, they started noticing the patterns the aliens had missed. Humans were not just surviving, they were learning, adapting, and creating solutions in ways that no distant observer could fully predict. The scientists looked at examples across every continent. In one city, a sudden flood destroyed roads and bridges, leaving thousands trapped. Within hours, ordinary people formed rescue teams, guiding neighbors to safety, sharing food and water, and finding ways to repair critical infrastructure with nothing but courage and ingenuity. In another region, a disease outbreak threatened a small village. There were no hospitals nearby, and medicine was scarce. But the villagers worked together, using traditional knowledge and simple tools to create clean water systems and improvise treatments. They documented their methods, communicated with nearby towns, and eventually stopped the disease from spreading. The researchers realized that the aliens had likely missed these kinds of moments because they did not look closely enough. From a distance, human mistakes and failures were visible, but the creativity and problem-solving that followed were subtle, quiet, and unpredictable. What the aliens had assumed was weakness was actually something different. Resilience. One researcher pointed to a chart showing natural disasters over the last century. "Look here," she said. "Every time humans face a major threat, something changes. Communities organize, new methods emerge, and even children find ways to help. That is not weakness. That is adaptation. That is intelligence combined with compassion." Another scientist added, "It's not just surviving. It's the way humans respond emotionally, socially, and creatively at the same time. We use our emotions, fear, hope, love, to motivate action. That is something no machine, no distant observer can calculate. That is a real form of power." As they continued, they noticed another surprising pattern. Humans often thrived under conditions that should have broken them. Wars, famine, disease, and natural disasters had left scars on communities. Yet these same communities often became stronger afterward. Families who had lost everything rebuilt their homes and farms. Cities that had been destroyed by floods or earthquakes developed better systems to prevent future damage. Knowledge and culture survived and spread, even in the harshest conditions. It became clear to the scientists that humans were not weak in the ways the aliens thought. Weakness was visible on the surface, but below it lay a strength built from struggle, suffering, and learning. Every failure created an opportunity for growth. Every loss inspired a new solution. The human species had survived for thousands of years, not because it was perfect, but because it could adapt, learn, and unite in the face of adversity. This discovery led the researchers to a deeper question. If aliens judged humans as weak because they only saw the surface, what else might they have misunderstood? The scientists realized that humans were unpredictable. They did not follow simple patterns. Their emotions, choices, and creativity made them impossible to forecast with precision. A species that seemed fragile from afar could, under the right conditions, accomplish extraordinary things. The team began documenting examples of human ingenuity that even they had overlooked before. In remote villages, people found ways to survive harsh winters with no modern technology. In crowded cities, individuals created informal networks to provide food, medicine, and safety for neighbors. Teenagers designed low-cost inventions to solve everyday problems. Artists, teachers, and doctors contributed in quiet ways, improving the lives of countless people without recognition. One scientist reflected quietly, "The aliens see what is easy to measure: technology, strength, numbers, but they miss what cannot be easily quantified: courage, creativity, compassion. Humans are strong in ways that cannot be calculated from space." The team also started to realize another truth. Humans often act against their own self-interest for the sake of others. Soldiers risk their lives for strangers. Volunteers rescue people they have never met. Ordinary citizens give time, energy, and resources to help communities far away. These acts of kindness, bravery, and sacrifice were invisible from a distance, but they were crucial to survival. They revealed a level of complexity and depth in human behavior that no alien observer could fully predict. Slowly, the scientists began to understand why the aliens had dismissed humanity. It was not because humans were weak. It was because humans were unpredictable. From orbit, only the mistakes and chaos were visible. The subtle, quiet, and extraordinary ways in which humans responded to challenges were invisible to those who judged them from afar. One night, the team gathered in the lab, staring at screens filled with data, photos, and videos from around the world. One researcher spoke softly, almost to herself. "Humans are messy, emotional, and unpredictable. That is true. But it is also our greatest strength. We survive because we care, because we create, because we refuse to give up." The others nodded. They realized that this understanding changed everything. Humans had been underestimated, not because they were weak, but because their power was hidden, subtle, and impossible to calculate with cold logic. The aliens had not been cruel. They had simply failed to see what was most important. The team also noticed how humans built connections, not just individually, but collectively. Communities formed informal networks that no government or institution could fully control. People shared knowledge, resources, and support. They innovated, organized, and solved problems in ways that were decentralized and chaotic, yet effective. This kind of power was unlike anything the aliens had likely encountered before. Over time, the researchers began to feel a quiet sense of pride in humanity. They were witnessing something remarkable: the hidden strength of an entire species. It was not obvious on the surface, and it did not rely on weapons, numbers, or rigid systems. It relied on something deeper: resilience, creativity, empathy, and courage. One scientist summed it up during a late-night discussion. "Humans are unpredictable, emotional, and chaotic. That is true. But it is also what makes them strong. Other species might be faster, stronger, or more intelligent in certain ways, but no other species can combine creativity, empathy, and survival instinct in the same way humans do. That is real power." As the night deepened, the team continued to analyze data, collecting examples of human innovation and courage from every corner of the globe. They realized that the aliens, in dismissing humans as weak, had missed the fundamental truth. The very traits they considered weaknesses were actually the source of humanity's hidden power. The team also reflected on what this meant for the future. If humans could recognize their own strength, if they could understand that their resilience, creativity, and compassion were forms of power, they could change the way they saw themselves. They could stop seeing chaos and conflict as signs of failure and start seeing them as opportunities for growth, innovation, and connection. The discovery had a profound impact on the researchers themselves. They began to act differently, approaching problems with more patience, creativity, and cooperation. They shared their findings with trusted colleagues, hoping to inspire a new way of thinking about humanity. They realized that even if the aliens never returned, the real journey was for humans to discover their own power and to understand that strength was not always visible, measurable, or immediate. And so, while the world continued to operate as usual, ordinary people living ordinary lives were quietly demonstrating extraordinary abilities every day. Farmers adapted to changing climates. Teachers educated children in difficult conditions. Volunteers provided aid in disasters, and ordinary citizens solved problems no one expected them to. Every small act of creativity, courage, and compassion was a thread in the larger story of human resilience, a story the aliens had not seen, but one that researchers were now beginning to fully understand. By observing closely and analyzing deeply, the scientists realized that humans were far from weak. They were unpredictable, resilient, compassionate, and capable of extraordinary problem-solving. And while the aliens had dismissed humanity from afar, the real strength of humans lay not in what was visible, but in what could be felt, created, and achieved when ordinary people faced extraordinary challenges. The more the team studied, the more they were convinced that the aliens' judgment was incomplete. Humanity's true power was not something that could be measured with instruments or numbers. It was alive in hearts, minds, and actions. It emerged in moments of crisis, in acts of kindness, in the ability to rise again after failure, and in the quiet determination of ordinary people who refused to give up. The researchers understood now that the aliens' dismissal was not an end, but a beginning. It was a challenge, a question left in silence. If humans are weak, why do they keep surviving? Why do they keep creating, caring, and adapting? And somewhere, deep in the labs and research centers, humans began to. The days following the scientists' discovery of humanity's hidden resilience brought a deeper understanding of human strength. While life on Earth seemed ordinary, crises began to show what the team had suspected all along. Humans were far stronger than anyone, even the aliens, could imagine. It began subtly. In one part of the world, heavy storms caused massive flooding. Entire villages were underwater. Roads disappeared. Crops were destroyed. Electricity and communication lines failed. From the outside, the disaster looked like a total failure, a sign of weakness, exactly what the aliens would have seen from orbit. But for the people living there, life did not stop. Neighbors organized impromptu rescue teams. Boats were borrowed, makeshift rafts were built, and children helped their parents carry food and water to those trapped. Strangers worked side by side, ignoring past rivalries and arguments, focused only on saving lives. Doctors treated the sick in schools and community centers that had become temporary hospitals. Farmers shared seeds and tools, helping rebuild damaged fields. People improvised, adapted, and took risks without waiting for official orders or instructions. The scientists studying these events were amazed. They saw that humans did not wait for perfect conditions or top-down plans. When disaster struck, ordinary people became extraordinary. Their actions were unpredictable, creative, and deeply human. Fear did not paralyze them. It fueled courage. The researchers realized that the aliens, watching from afar, could not have understood this. From orbit, they might have seen only chaos, the flood, the destroyed homes, the danger. They would have missed the courage, cooperation, and compassion that followed. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, a severe drought threatened millions of people. Crops failed, water supplies ran low, and communities faced hunger. Yet humans adapted. People dug wells, collected rainwater, and shared resources across regions. Scientists, farmers, and ordinary citizens collaborated to find solutions. Some created new irrigation methods using simple materials. Others developed community kitchens to feed those in need. Children helped carry water, teenagers organized relief efforts, and families supported each other in ways that could not be planned or predicted. The researchers noted that these events shared a common pattern. In every crisis, humans displayed three critical qualities: adaptability, courage, and compassion. Adaptability allowed them to create solutions quickly, often using limited resources. Courage enabled them to face danger without hesitation, putting the needs of others before themselves. Compassion drove collaboration, inspiring people to work together even when they had nothing to gain personally. The team realized this was the point the aliens had missed. Humans appeared weak when viewed from a distance, because their actions did not follow predictable patterns. Humans did not rely on machines or strict plans to survive. They relied on their creativity, their hearts, and their willingness to act even when the odds were against them. That unpredictability, combined with empathy and courage, was a form of power no alien intelligence could calculate. The scientists began collecting stories from around the globe. In a city struck by an earthquake, volunteers dug through rubble to save strangers trapped under debris. In a small village, people worked together to build a school after a fire destroyed the original building. In a remote desert, communities found ways to bring water to their towns, preventing famine and disease. Each story was small on its own, but together they painted a picture of a species capable of remarkable resilience and ingenuity. One researcher reflected aloud, "The aliens thought weakness was a lack of strength, a lack of control. But our strength is not control. It is improvisation. It is connection. It is care. That is something no distant observer could measure." The team began to understand another important truth. Humans thrived not only in disaster, but also in uncertainty. When systems failed, when plans fell apart, when life became unpredictable, humans found new ways to survive and even thrive. This ability to adapt under pressure was a defining trait of the species. It was not always visible on the surface, but it was present everywhere, in every community, in every response to crisis. As the researchers studied these patterns, they noticed the emotional dimension of human strength. Humans were driven not only by survival instinct, but by emotion. Fear, hope, love, grief, and compassion all influenced decisions in ways that were unpredictable but powerful. Where other species or machines might calculate risks purely logically, humans combined logic with emotion, resulting in creative solutions that no algorithm could predict. The team documented moments of courage that seemed impossible. A teenager in a city flooded by rainwater guided elderly neighbors to safety despite the risk of drowning. A mother in a desert region walked miles to bring water to a sick child she had never met. Farmers shared limited supplies with communities they had never interacted with before. Each action was ordinary in context, but extraordinary in impact. Humans were constantly transforming weakness into strength through action, connection, and empathy. The scientists realized that this kind of power was unique. It was not strength in the traditional sense. Humans were not physically stronger than many species, nor were they invincible. But their power lay in their unpredictability, their ability to respond creatively to impossible situations, and their commitment to each other. The aliens had missed this entirely, judging humans by visible weakness while ignoring the invisible strength that sustained them. The more the team observed, the clearer it became. Human resilience was not just about survival. It was about transformation. Challenges did not merely test humans. They changed them. Communities became stronger, knowledge spread, skills improved, and cooperation grew after every disaster. Each challenge left humans better prepared for the next, constantly evolving in ways the aliens could not see from orbit. The scientists began to communicate their findings quietly to trusted leaders. They explained that humans were underestimated because their strength was subtle and hard to measure. Unlike species that relied on brute force or rigid organization, humans relied on improvisation, creativity, empathy, and courage. These qualities, they argued, were far more powerful than they appeared. They also emphasized the importance of understanding and celebrating human potential. By recognizing these traits, humans could better prepare for challenges, support each other, and continue growing as a species. The researchers felt a quiet excitement. Humanity's true power had been hidden, and now it was beginning to be understood, at least by those who studied it carefully. While this was happening in secret, the world continued on its usual path. People went about their daily lives, unaware of the larger truth being discovered behind the scenes. Children played, workers labored, families struggled, and communities celebrated. Humans continued to demonstrate resilience, courage, and creativity in countless small ways. Without recognition or reward, the researchers realized something profound. The world itself was full of quiet heroes, ordinary people whose actions collectively represented the real power of humanity. It was not visible from space, but it was everywhere, quietly shaping the future of the species. This hidden strength, they concluded, was precisely what made humans unique and potentially unstoppable. By observing deeply and patiently, the scientists began to feel a sense of hope. Humans were not weak. They were powerful in ways that could not be calculated, predicted, or dismissed. Their strength was emotional, creative, and relational. It emerged when it was needed most, often in moments of crisis. And it was sustained by empathy, cooperation, and courage. And while the aliens had left, dismissing humans as weak, the researchers now understood that this dismissal was not the final word. Humans were not defined by what others thought of them, nor by their visible failures. Humans were defined by their ability to rise, to adapt, to care, and to create. That was their real power, waiting to be fully realized. As the night drew on, the researchers continued their work, documenting every example of human courage, ingenuity, and compassion. They knew that while the aliens had underestimated humanity, humans themselves were only beginning to understand the extent of their own strength. And when that understanding spread, the species would be ready for anything, whether it came from Earth, from distant stars, or from within themselves. In the quiet of the lab, one researcher looked out the window at the lights of the city below and whispered, "We are stronger than anyone can see. We survive, we create, and we care. That is what makes us human. And that is what makes us powerful." The others nodded in agreement, feeling a deep sense of connection to the countless people whose stories they had collected. Humanity's true power was not measured in armies or machines. It was measured in hearts, minds, and actions. And that power, subtle and quiet as it was, could never be ignored, even by the most advanced observers in the galaxy. After weeks of observing, studying, and analyzing humanity's hidden strengths, the scientists realized something extraordinary. Humans were not just resilient. They were unpredictable in ways that even they had trouble fully understanding. The aliens had seen only the surface, conflicts, failures, and chaos. But humans, when faced with challenges, often created solutions no one could have predicted. The unpredictability itself was a form of power, and it became more obvious as the scientists began to look closer to test this. The researchers conducted controlled experiments, not on people directly, but through careful observation of small communities in natural disasters, economic crises, and social challenges. They observed how humans reacted under pressure, how ordinary people responded when normal systems failed, and how creativity and collaboration emerged spontaneously. In one city, a major storm destroyed the main water supply and electricity network. Streets were flooded, hospitals were overwhelmed, and people were stranded in their homes. From the outside, it looked like total collapse. But within hours, the community had organized itself. Volunteers knocked on doors, guiding people to safe areas. Food, water, and medical supplies were shared freely, and improvised clinics opened in schools and community centers. Engineers worked alongside ordinary citizens to repair damaged infrastructure using whatever tools were available. Even teenagers and children played important roles, alerting neighbors to danger and helping care for those in need. The scientists watching were astonished. The human response was neither planned nor predictable. There was no central command, no rigid system. Yet despite this chaos, life did not end. It adapted, improvised, and solved problems. Humans turned their weakness into a source of strength, using compassion and creativity as tools. Meanwhile, in a remote village affected by a severe drought, the team observed another remarkable pattern. Water sources had dried up, crops were failing, and livestock were dying. The villagers, facing desperate circumstances, began to innovate. They dug new wells using hand tools, collected dew and rainwater in creative ways, and shared resources with neighboring villages. Community members rotated responsibilities to maximize efficiency, caring not only for themselves, but for everyone around them. Even the youngest children contributed by helping carry water and tending to animals. The researchers realized something crucial. Humans often acted against their immediate self-interest for the greater good. Strangers helped strangers. Parents helped children they had never met. Communities collaborated across borders and cultural divides. These actions, they understood, were invisible from a distance. The aliens had likely missed this entirely, seeing only chaos and weakness while ignoring the extraordinary human capacity for empathy, courage, and improvisation. Inspired by these observations, the scientists began to conduct stress tests in simulated environments. They created situations where communication systems failed, resources were limited, and problems seemed insurmountable. Volunteers in controlled experiments were given challenges that mirrored real-world crises, and the results amazed the researchers. Humans consistently found solutions that were both creative and practical. They adapted to changing circumstances, collaborated effectively, and often exceeded expectations. It became clear that the human species thrived under pressure. The more unpredictable or difficult the situation, the more creativity and cooperation emerged. Where other species might rely on instinct or rigid patterns, humans combined intuition, learning, and emotion to find solutions. This adaptability was not only practical, it was emotional, moral, and social. Humans were not machines. They were complex, capable of using fear, hope, love, and courage as tools to navigate impossible situations. The researchers also noticed how humans learned from failure. Mistakes were not endpoints, they were stepping stones. Communities adapted after disasters, economies improved after crisis, and individuals developed new skills after challenges. Humans evolved not despite their failures, but because of them. Weakness in the human experience was not permanent. It was temporary, and often the catalyst for growth. In another part of the world, a wildfire destroyed homes and farmland. From the outside, it looked like utter devastation. Yet the affected communities responded with incredible resilience. Residents formed volunteer firefighting teams, built temporary shelters, shared food and water, and worked tirelessly to save both people and animals. Even after the flames were extinguished, the community worked together to rebuild, learning from the disaster to create safer, more sustainable infrastructure. The scientists were beginning to see a pattern that stretched across continents, cultures, and environments. Humans were strongest, not when life was easy, but when life was hard. Strength emerged in moments of crisis, fueled by courage, creativity, and collaboration. Weakness, vulnerability, and unpredictability were not signs of failure. They were opportunities for growth and transformation. The team also began to study the emotional side of human strength. Humans acted not only out of necessity, but out of empathy and care. A single person's courage often inspired others. Acts of kindness multiplied, creating networks of support that no one planned. When people saw others suffering, they felt compelled to act, even at great personal risk. This emotional intelligence, combined with practical problem-solving, created a form of power no machine, algorithm, or alien intelligence could anticipate. As the observations continued, the researchers realized that human adaptability was a combination of multiple forces: improvisation, creativity, collaboration, emotional intelligence, and moral courage. These forces interacted unpredictably, making humans highly effective in situations that required flexibility and ingenuity. Humans were not simply survivors, they were innovators under pressure. One evening, the lead researcher addressed the team. The aliens saw only chaos and weakness. They didn't understand that weakness is not a flaw, it's a stage. It's the stage from which humans create, adapt, and grow. We are learning that the true power of humans lies in our unpredictability, our empathy, and our courage. That is something the universe has yet to fully see. The team nodded, understanding that their research had implications beyond mere observation. Humanity's hidden power could shape the future in ways no one had imagined. Ordinary people, when challenged, could solve extraordinary problems. Communities could organize without central authority. Creativity and empathy could overcome obstacles that brute force could not. The scientists also began sharing their findings with select global leaders. They emphasized that humans' greatest strength was not in armies or weapons, but in resilience, collaboration, and creativity. They argued that understanding and nurturing these qualities could help humanity thrive, even in the face of disasters, social upheaval, or challenges from beyond the stars. Meanwhile, life continued on Earth as usual. People went about their days, unaware of the detailed research being conducted in hidden labs. Yet every small act helping a neighbor, sharing resources, solving a local problem was part of the growing evidence that humans were not weak, as the aliens had assumed. Humans were powerful in subtle, invisible ways. The scientists concluded that the aliens' dismissal was based on incomplete observation. From orbit, humans appeared fragile, chaotic, and unpredictable. But from close observation, humans were adaptive, courageous, empathetic, and creative. Weakness was temporary, mistakes were learning opportunities, and unpredictability was a strength. The aliens had underestimated humans because they had only seen the surface. And humans' real power remained hidden, waiting to be discovered by the end of their study. The team felt a deep sense of pride and hope. Humans had survived countless challenges, adapted in countless ways, and demonstrated remarkable courage and compassion. Their strength was not visible from afar, but it was everywhere. Humans' ability to respond to adversity, care for one another, and create solutions in unpredictable circumstances was extraordinary. And while the aliens had left, dismissing humanity as weak, the researchers realized that humans were only beginning to understand their own power. It was not in weapons, governments, or rigid systems. It was in hearts, minds, and actions. Humans' resilience, creativity, empathy, and courage were the foundation of a species that could survive, adapt, and thrive in ways no one had yet imagined. The lesson was clear. True power was not measured by appearances. Humans' real strength had always been there, quietly waiting for recognition. And as the scientists documented, studied, and shared their findings, they knew that humanity was on the verge of realizing it for themselves. The world outside remained unaware. But the hidden story of human strength was unfolding. Ordinary people, through ordinary actions, were demonstrating extraordinary power. And while the aliens had underestimated humans, the species was quietly proving that weakness could transform into resilience. Unpredictability could become strategy, and compassion could become an unstoppable force in the quiet of the labs. The researchers looked out over cities and villages, mountains and rivers, and whispered to each other, "Humans are not weak. They survive, they adapt, and they care. That is real power. That is humanity." And somewhere in the vastness of the universe, the truth remained unnoticed by the distant observers. Humans' greatest strength. Months had passed since the aliens had appeared and quietly dismissed humanity. On the surface, life seemed ordinary. Children went to school, workers went to offices, farmers tended their fields, and cities continued their rhythm of traffic, commerce, and daily routines. Yet beneath this normalcy, the story of human strength was unfolding in ways that were invisible to the world, and perhaps even to the aliens themselves. The researchers, who had been studying humanity's hidden resilience, realized that humans were beginning to understand something profound. Weakness was not permanent. Failure was not final, and chaos could lead to creativity. Every challenge, whether it was a natural disaster, a social conflict, or a personal struggle, revealed a hidden depth in humans. Ordinary people became extraordinary when circumstances demanded it, and their actions were often unpredictable, creative, and courageous. In one region, a series of earthquakes had destroyed homes, bridges, and roads. From space, it looked like collapse, exactly what the aliens might have seen and interpreted as weakness. But from the ground, a different story was unfolding. Community members organized rescue efforts without waiting for government instructions. Engineers and volunteers worked side by side to rebuild critical infrastructure. Strangers shared food, water, and shelter. Even children played a role, helping carry supplies or comforting those who were frightened. The scientists observing these events noticed a pattern. Humans did not act in isolation. They formed networks, informal yet incredibly effective, that allowed them to adapt and survive. These networks were unpredictable. No plan could replicate them. No algorithm could predict them. Yet they worked. Humans were capable of organizing themselves spontaneously, finding solutions in the midst of chaos. Elsewhere, a massive storm hit a coastal city, flooding streets and damaging homes. Emergency services were overwhelmed. From the outside, it seemed like failure. But people did not wait to be rescued, they acted. Neighbors formed boat brigades to rescue those trapped in their homes. Families opened their doors to strangers. Local businesses shared resources with shelters. Engineers repaired temporary water systems using materials from nearby construction sites. Volunteers coordinated supply distribution with nothing but creativity and determination. The researchers realized that this was precisely what the aliens had missed. From orbit, they could see destruction, but they could not see the human response: ingenuity, courage, and collaboration. Weakness and disaster were visible. Strength and resilience were invisible. Humans thrived in unpredictability, finding solutions that no distant observer could calculate. The emotional dimension of human strength also became clear. Humans acted not only out of necessity, but out of empathy. People risked their lives for strangers, comforted the vulnerable, and inspired others through acts of kindness. Courage was contagious. When one person took action, others followed. Compassion created networks of support that multiplied the effects of individual actions. It was not strength in the traditional sense. It was a power built on human connection, emotional intelligence, and moral courage. In small villages, the researchers documented similar phenomena. A sudden drought threatened crops and livestock. Villagers, who had faced scarcity before, pooled their knowledge and resources. They dug new wells, shared seeds, and taught each other new farming methods. Families rotated responsibilities so that no one suffered alone. Children learned to help, to observe, to adapt. Creativity and cooperation turned a potential disaster into an opportunity for growth. The scientists began to see a larger pattern emerging. Humans were strongest when circumstances forced them to adapt. Weakness, failure, and unpredictability were not signs of the species' limitations. They were catalysts for resilience. Each challenge produced new knowledge, new skills, and new bonds between people. Humans evolved not despite hardship, but because of it. This realization changed the way the researchers thought about humanity's future. If humans could recognize and nurture their own hidden strengths, they could prepare for crises more effectively. They could harness unpredictability as a source of power, turn failure into learning, and cultivate compassion as a strategy for survival. The team began to compile their research into detailed reports, documenting stories of courage, creativity, and cooperation from around the world. One night, a researcher reflected aloud. The aliens dismissed us because they only saw what was easy to measure: chaos, mistakes, weakness. But they missed what we do when faced with impossible odds. We rise, we create, we care. That is our real power, and it has always been there, even when we didn't notice it ourselves. Another researcher added, we survive because we adapt. We thrive because we connect. And we grow because we turn failure into opportunity. That is something no distant observer can calculate, and that is what makes humanity extraordinary. The team also realized that humans' power was not static. It was dynamic, emerging in response to changing circumstances. The more unpredictable and difficult the situation, the more creativity and courage emerged. This adaptability, combined with empathy, made humans incredibly resilient. Weakness was temporary, chaos was productive, and failure was transformative. Even in moments that seemed ordinary, humans displayed extraordinary qualities. Teachers educated children during crisis. Doctors worked long hours to save lives. Farmers developed new techniques to preserve crops. Neighbors helped neighbors. Communities organized without formal authority. Every act, small or large, contributed to a larger pattern. Humans thrived not despite challenges, but because of them. The researchers began to share these insights with trusted leaders, emphasizing that humanity's true strength was not in armies, technology, or numbers, but in resilience, creativity, and compassion. Leaders were encouraged to nurture these qualities, to recognize that unpredictability was a resource, and that collaboration and empathy were essential tools for survival. As the study continued, the team began to see that humanity's hidden power had implications beyond Earth. If the aliens ever returned, they would not see weakness. They would witness resilience, courage, creativity, and empathy, qualities that no machine or distant observer could fully predict. Humans were not simply survivors. They were adaptable, unpredictable, and capable of extraordinary problem-solving. One day, the lead researcher spoke to the team. The aliens left because they underestimated us. But that doesn't matter anymore. We are beginning to see our own power, and that is what counts. Weakness, chaos, and failure are not the end. They are opportunities for growth. Compassion, creativity, and courage are our real strengths. That is what will define our future. The team nodded, understanding that humanity's story was one of hidden power. It was not obvious to outsiders, but it was everywhere, in ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. It was in acts of kindness, courage, and creativity that often went unnoticed. It was in communities coming together without instruction, in children learning to help, in neighbors supporting neighbors. The researchers realized that humanity's power was both subtle and immense. It could not be measured by conventional tools or instruments. It emerged in response to challenges, in moments of crisis, and through the quiet persistence of ordinary people. Weakness and failure were not limits. They were the starting points for growth and innovation. As the world continued on its usual path, the hidden story of human resilience unfolded. People faced challenges every day, large and small, and met them with courage, creativity, and compassion. They solved problems, helped others, and adapted in ways that could not be predicted. Their strength was invisible from afar, but undeniable to those who observed closely. In the final weeks of the research, the team concluded that humanity's true power had always been there, quietly waiting to be recognized. It was not in weapons, wealth, or authority. It was in the ability to rise after failure, to adapt under pressure, to connect with others, and to create solutions in impossible circumstances. Humans were not weak. They were unpredictable, resilient, compassionate, and extraordinary. The aliens might have dismissed humanity from afar, but humans had begun to understand their own strength. They could survive, adapt, innovate, and care for one another in ways no distant observer could measure. The species' hidden power was finally becoming visible to those who were willing to look closely. As the researchers looked out over cities, villages, and landscapes, they whispered to each other, "Humans are stronger than anyone can see. They survive, they adapt, they care, and they create. That is our real power. That is what makes us human." And somewhere in the vastness of space, the truth remained unseen by the distant observers. Humans' greatest strength was subtle, invisible, and unpredictable, but it was extraordinary. The species that had once been dismissed as weak was quietly proving that resilience, creativity, compassion, and courage were forces no one could ignore. The world continued, ordinary on the surface, yet extraordinary beneath. Humanity had survived, adapted, and grown. The hidden power of ordinary people had been revealed to those who watched closely, and slowly, humanity itself began to recognize what had always been true. Weakness was temporary, failure was transformative, and compassion and courage were the real measures of strength. And so, the story ended not with a battle, not with fire woe,